Hello. The Kinahan Gang was once a small criminal group in Ireland during the 1990s, but now the story is entirely different. They are currently considered one of the largest criminal organizations in the world, standing alongside the Sicilian Mafia and the Colombian and Mexican cartels. So how did Christopher Vincent Kinahan Sr., once the leader of a small criminal gang, rise to become an internationally wanted crime boss? Christopher Kinahan was born on March 23, 1957, in Dublin, Ireland, and grew up in a middle-class family. His father managed a dairy farm, and his family was fairly well off at the time. Though his relatives affectionately called him Christy, behind that sweet name was a stormy soul. From a young age, Christy displayed intelligence, but he quickly grew bored with traditional schooling. Eventually, after many days at school, he decided to drop out. One might think that life would go downhill from there, but by the time he was in his 20s, he was living a seemingly normal life with a job as a taxi driver, married, and had a young child. However, Christy was not satisfied with this life. He felt restless and yearned for more money. Initially, Christy started his criminal career with small crimes like car theft, fraud, and check scams. But in the early 1980s, Ireland's crime landscape changed dramatically when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, leading to a heroin explosion on the European market. It wasn't long before Ireland faced a severe drug crisis of its own. Michael O'Sullivan, one of the top police officers at the time, said, "It was a market ready to be taken." He led investigations into the sudden increase in drugs within the community and soon had his sights set on Christy. By the early 1990s, heroin was almost non-existent, but in the blink of an eye, it flooded in, devastating inner-city areas. Entire communities were collapsing, with many families being ruined by drugs. It was said that at the time, the whole city was reeling. The person controlling the drug market at that time was Larry Dunn, a man with access to cheap heroin, which he sold at exorbitant prices. At the peak of his criminal career, Larry controlled around 95% of Ireland's drug market. However, in 1985, he was arrested and sentenced to 14 years in prison for drug trafficking. With Larry in prison, Christy saw his opportunity. Using the connections he had built while committing smaller crimes, he was introduced to drug traffickers. Christy observed how Larry reaped enormous profits from the drug trade, and a bold decision began to form in his mind to enter this high-stakes game. Before long, Christy quickly organized drug shipments into Ireland, skillfully keeping himself in the background to avoid police attention. This allowed him to take the lion's share of the profits without the worry of being hunted like some of his associates. By 1986, Christy had become Ireland's largest heroin supplier, a position no one would have expected from a petty criminal. To mislead law enforcement, this crime boss crafted the image of a successful British businessman. He rented a modest apartment in the suburbs of Dublin, which became a base for storing drugs before distributing them to small-time street dealers. To complete his image, he drove a flashy red sports car, dressed sharply, and earned the nickname Dapper Don for his stylish and charming persona. However, no one can hide a life of crime forever. Due to his inexperience in the drug trade, so Christy couldn't avoid making serious mistakes in distribution. By the end of 1986, fate caught up with him when police arrested Christy in Dublin with £17,000 worth of heroin. He was preparing to distribute it to his street dealers but was unfortunately caught in the act. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but for someone as smart as Christy, being behind bars wasn't going to stop him. While in prison, he managed to acquire a computer and used it to hone his skills in international drug smuggling. He maintained contact with previous drug traffickers and began planning a significant comeback. When he was released, Christy not only returned, but also made it his mission to expand his gang from a small group of criminals in Dublin into an international crime syndicate. Drawing on connections he built in prison, he began smuggling drugs from South America, not just into Ireland, but also into the UK. As the market expanded, so did his gang, which quickly grew across Europe. However, his life of crime was far from simple. In 1997, Christy was arrested again. This time for possessing stolen checks. His time in prison was far from wasted. During his 4-year sentence, he earned 2 university degrees, one in Spanish and another in Russian. Notably, Christy refused early release in 2001 so he could complete his 2nd degree. These skills and connections proved invaluable after his release. not long after Christie moved to Spain, where he was suspected of establishing several drug smuggling routes into Western Europe, working with Mexican and Colombian cartels as well as the Russian Mafia. Soon, Christie had transformed his gang into a formidable force in the international drug trade. After achieving this, new opportunities opened up before him. To increase his wealth, Christie didn't stop at drug trafficking. He also ventured into money laundering and arms smuggling. At the height of his criminal career, Christie's gang was estimated to be worth billions of dollars, though the actual figure might be even higher. With such vast wealth, Christie understood that he had become a target for both law enforcement and rival gangs. For this reason, he began devising new ways to hide his illegal operations and the money flowing from them. He had no intention of going back to prison, so around 2015, Christie decided to move to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. While the UAE has extradition treaties with the UK and Ireland, but extraditing criminals from there is notoriously difficult due to complex political reasons. In Dubai, Christie continued to expand his influence. He established several businesses under the name Christopher Vincent, attempting to make these operations appear legitimate while secretly using them to launder money. But by 2020, Christie decided to take things to the next level, or at least he tried to, without realizing that his criminal adventure was nearing its end. In 2020, a pivotal moment occurred for the Kinahan gang when Christie decided to hand control over to his son, Daniel Kinahan. If you're a fan of boxing, you've likely heard of Daniel, a well-known figure in the sport. In upcoming videos, I'll talk more about him so you can get a better understanding of this high-profile character. In 2016, there was an attempted assassination targeting Daniel during a public weigh-in event in Ireland. While the assassins failed, but the event revealed the extent of the Kinahan gang's involvement in the criminal underworld, sending shockwaves through many communities. Perhaps Christie didn't want his business to become even more public. So to protect himself from police attention, he handed over leadership to Daniel. However, even after stepping down, Christie continued operating in the shadows, seeking new deals and strengthening the family's power. His latest plan promised to elevate the gang to new heights. Christie's plan was bold. He aimed to purchase 9 outdated DHC Buffalo planes from the Egyptian Air Force. These small aircraft, known for their ability to take off and land in difficult terrains, were to be used for smuggling drugs through Africa and distributing them to countries worldwide. But what puzzled many was how someone as notorious as an international crime lord like Christie could orchestrate such a large deal without being detected. This was because Christie meticulously prepared for this move. He created a network of websites and shell companies, presenting himself as a legitimate businessman in the aviation industry. Using his middle name Christopher Vincent, he crafted the image of a humanitarian, claiming that he wanted to purchase the planes to assist relief organizations operating in sub-Saharan Africa. By doing so, Christie gave himself a credible cover, making people believe that he had noble goals in life. To make his scheme even more foolproof, Christie could even secure government grants if his company operated as a non-profit organization. He began his plan to purchase the aircraft in 2019, establishing contact with a small aviation business in Malawi called Nyasa Air Charters Ltd. This was a very small airline, with only one plane mainly involved in humanitarian missions. Christie had planned every step carefully, intending to use Nyasa as a front for buying the 9 military planes without raising suspicion from authorities. He hoped that this would build a strong presence in Africa, allowing him to be perceived positively by those seeking to do business. However, before utilizing this company, Christie first had to take control of it. He shrewdly pushed for the creation of a new company called Crescent and Crosses with a plan to establish the most legitimate image possible. In an email, Christie explained that he wanted Crescent and Crosses' website to give the illusion of being large and professional, positioning the company to be the best in securing funding and leasing planes. Crescent and Crosses would hold the agreement while Nyasa would operate the Egyptian planes. Christie's plan was coming together, and this high-stakes game was approaching its explosive turning point. With his cunning and intelligence, Christie was on the brink of embarking on a new criminal adventure, where everything could change in an instant. His life was once again about to be tested, and confrontations with the police and other gangs were sure to become more intense than ever before. To maintain a lower profile in the criminal underworld, Christie decided to hand over representation for the aircraft deal to Adam Lincoln Woodington Wood, a Zimbabwean businessman whom he had worked with for many years and trusted deeply. Adam wasn't just a reliable partner, he also had connections with several companies Christie needed to push the acquisition forward. These companies included Seadream Homes S.L., Seadream Middle East General Trading, CV Aviation Consulting Services based in Dubai, and Crescent and Crosses Pte. Limited in Singapore. As the humanitarian company Crescent and Crosses was being established, Christie and Adam decided to attend a key event, the 2019 Aviation Conference at Sharm el-Sheikh on the shores of the Red Sea. The conference was organized by the World Food Program and attended by former Egyptian Minister of Civil Aviation, Lieutenant General Yunus el-Masri, who had been the commander of the Egyptian Air Force until 2018. At this event, numerous aviation service providers for disaster relief programs and charities, such as the International Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders, gathered, which made Christie even more cautious in his every move. With his humanitarian image already established, Christie wasted no time in exploring the plane purchase right after the conference. On January 8, 2020, a man named Ibrahim Eldasiki, the CEO of Seadream Middle East General Trading, reached out to the Egyptian military. Christie had entrusted Ibrahim with overseeing the financial transactions related to the aircraft purchase. Ibrahim contacted Major General Hisham Nabil Munir, the Egyptian defense attaché in Abu Dhabi, and proposed a deal offering over $6 million for 9 planes. Enticed by this substantial figure, Major General Hisham expressed deep interest in the deal. On February 11, 2020, the Major General sent Seadream a list of aircraft along with parts and equipment available for sale. More than 30 planes were offered for Christie to choose from. After confirming the selection of 9 Buffalo planes, Major General Hisham provided the necessary technical details for Seadream to review. He also authorized the Egyptian Air Force to send personnel for an on-site inspection of the planes at Al Meza Air Base in Cairo. Adam was appointed as one of the primary inspectors, alongside Egyptian representatives handling the transaction. Notably, they agreed to waive the end-user certificate requirement for the planes, meaning Christie would be free to sell them later, exactly as planned. Throughout these tense negotiations, Ibrahim and Adam regularly updated Christie through messages. By December 2020, the group felt confident that the plane purchase deal was nearing success. However, they were unaware that serious challenges were looming ahead. As the deal was nearing completion, the Egyptian side demanded a 90% deposit on the value of the planes, an enormous sum Christie couldn't afford at the time. With no time to waste, Christie and Ibrahim turned to a Dubai-based lending firm, Alpen Asset Advisors Limited, hoping to raise the needed capital. In a tense meeting, Ibrahim explained that they required around $16 million to finalize the deal with Egypt. He emphasized that the company could raise 25% of this amount, but needed further support for the remainder. The Alpen representative handling the case appeared perplexed by the nature of the deal and requested more detailed information before approving any funds. Pressure mounted on Christie and his team as time was running out, and everything could collapse in an instant. They needed to act smarter than ever because in the criminal world, delays could lead to catastrophic consequences. Eventually, in an uneasy meeting, Christie and Ibrahim realized they couldn't provide more detailed information about the deal due to its illicit nature. They left empty-handed, disappointed, exiting the offices of Alpen Asset Advisors Limited with nothing. But no one could crush Christie's determination. He refused to accept failure. Fueled with relentless drive, Christie began approaching more banks and lenders. However, despite exhausting every contact, but no one was willing to provide the money he needed. With funds running dry and no other options, Christie was forced to accept that his plan to purchase the planes had collapsed after 21 months of negotiations and countless efforts to secure financing. Yet this wasn't the worst he would face. In April 2022, a devastating blow struck. The U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, imposed sanctions on Christopher Kinahan and his 2 sons, Christopher Jr. and Daniel Kinahan. These measures not only targeted family members, but also attacked other notorious associates in the Kinahan gang, aiming to completely dismantle the criminal network that Christie had painstakingly built. The climax of this storm occurred on April 12, 2022, when the U.S. State Department announced a massive $15 million reward for any information leading to the arrest or conviction of the 3 Kinahan family members. Police and specialized crime agencies have continued to intensify the pressure, closely monitoring Christie's every move with the determination to bring him to justice. It is believed that Christie is in hiding as the extradition process from the United Arab Emirates is extremely complicated due to political reasons. Currently, he is suspected of living in seclusion in Dubai with his longtime girlfriend. The couple once dreamed of getting married and settling in Zimbabwe, where Christie could easily establish new drug trafficking routes and live in peace. However, that dream was quickly shattered when the Zimbabwean government, under pressure from the U.S., refused to grant him residency. Now Christie is like a trapped animal in his own snare in Dubai, where the threat of arrest constantly looms if he ever leaves. However, at the age of 65, it seems the crime boss is not too concerned about his own safety, and perhaps even feels excited by the ongoing game. What will happen next? If there are any new developments, I'll update you immediately in the upcoming videos.
Homes and people burned to ashes, individuals shot down, a violent conflict with a notorious biker gang, and large quantities of drugs sold on the dark web. All of these are the handiwork of one man. He calls himself the Godfather. Despite being imprisoned in another country, he continues to wreak havoc back home. If he targets you, you are certainly in big trouble, yet there is one important and specific thing he has never been able to accomplish. This is the story of Simo D, also known as the Godfather of Twente. Simo's real name is Mohammed, born in 1980 in Morocco, but he eventually moved to the Netherlands after his parents left Morocco in hopes of a better future. As a child, Simo frequently moved from one boarding school to another. His relationship with his parents deteriorated, and his personality became increasingly difficult to control. Simo began associating with the wrong crowd, leading to frequent run-ins with the police. At the age of 25, Simo purchased a grow shop named Super Grow in Hengelo. This was a place where people could buy equipment to grow plants, from tomatoes to basil and even cannabis, which naturally associated the shop with cannabis cultivation. Owning this shop introduced Simo to individuals familiar with growing cannabis. From there, Simo started connecting with people who dealt in all sorts of drugs, from cannabis to cocaine and more. Eventually, Simo acquired another grow shop called Two in Action, located in Enschede, near the German border. The police suspected that Simo was running a gang from Two in Action, involved in setting up illegal cannabis farms and selling other illicit substances. The shop became the gang's main base. Simo ordered his subordinates to smuggle these substances across the border into Germany using cars, leading to an investigation by both Dutch and German police. In 2012, undercover police officers struck a deal with Simo's gang to purchase 10 kilograms of cocaine. However, the gang members were unaware of the sting operation, and when they arrived at the meeting point, they were arrested. At the time of the botched deal, Simo was already in custody for another crime. During a dispute at a cafe, Simo had pulled out a gun and shot a man 6 times. The victim was hit in the leg, but fortunately survived. Simo was sentenced to 4 years in prison for this incident, and during his incarceration, prosecutors also charged him with involvement in the gang operating out of Two in Action. Simo always denied being the leader of any gang or being involved in drug trafficking. A witness used by the prosecutor stated, "I received 10,000 euros from Simo to put my name on a cannabis farm, and he was always the true owner." Simo, on the other hand, said, "Sometimes I delivered materials from my grow shop to certain locations. Occasionally, there was a cannabis farm there. I also gave advice on how to set it up from time to time, but I never set up or owned anything." Despite his denials, Simo was sentenced to an additional 2 years in prison. After being released early, he immediately returned to his old ways of smuggling and selling drugs, but this time with a completely different approach. After the failed deal with undercover officers that led to the arrest of his two accomplices, Simo decided to sell drugs via the dark web to avoid face-to-face interactions, thereby reducing the risks. Selling on the dark web was suggested by his accomplice, Marcus, an intelligent individual often referred to as a nerd and nicknamed Glasses. The dark web is a hidden part of the internet that requires special software, configurations, or access permissions to reach. Users of the dark web can remain completely anonymous. On the dark web, numerous websites revolve around the buying and selling of drugs. Simo saw this as the perfect way to sell his products in the future and enlisted Marcus to set everything up. In no time, people from all over the world were placing orders and paying with Bitcoin. These orders would be received by Simo, who then distributed them to his accomplices at various storage facilities across the Netherlands. The accomplices would smuggle the drugs to a house in Germany, package the orders in envelopes, and send the parcels through various post offices and mailboxes. Simo recruited a man named Zakaria to help with this plan. Zakaria rented the house in Germany where the drugs would be smuggled to, and from there, the orders would be packaged. Zakaria also hired people to package and send the orders. According to police records, Simo sold drugs worth millions of dollars worldwide. Using this new method, they had truly struck gold. However, this new approach only lasted for a short time because unfortunately, it led to trouble for Simo once again in 2015. By chance, witnesses in the German city of Gronau spotted a Mercedes parked in front of a mailbox. They then saw two men dropping off numerous packages, which wasn't unusual. However, these men were wearing gloves and appeared very cautious when handling the packages. Although everything seemed normal, something felt off, and the witnesses alerted a postal worker immediately after the men left. The postal worker decided to open a few of the packages, and they were all filled with drugs. The worker promptly contacted the police, and a total of 60 packages were seized. Not long after, Zakaria was stopped by the police in the very same Mercedes that the witnesses had seen. He claimed the car didn't belong to him, but to Simo. Simo was then arrested when the witnesses confirmed that they had seen him dropping off the packages into the mailbox. Simo was furious that Zakaria had confessed to the police and decided to exact revenge, but things quickly spiraled out of control. While being held in Gronau, Simo continued to lead his gang. He had multiple phones in his cell that he used to communicate through various apps under the names GF, Mr. Sosa, and Souza Souza. GF stood for Godfather. These phones allowed him to maintain the gang's operations and direct his subordinates, Marcus, Henri, and Moritz. What followed was absolute chaos back home, as Simo faced business conflicts as well as personal feuds. It all began on January 31st, 2017, when a man was driving home in his Renault Megane after hanging out with friends in Hengelo. Just as he sat down in his car, a man suddenly approached and fired multiple shots at close range. The victim was hit twice in the wrist and 4 times in the shoulder, but it seemed as though a miracle had occurred, allowing him to survive. He later stated on the Dutch TV show Opsporing Verzocht that he was incredibly lucky to be alive and insisted that he was not involved in any criminal activity and had no enemies. After investigating, the police concluded that he may have been the wrong target. The actual target came forward to the police after the incident. He lived in the same neighborhood, also drove a Renault Megane, and was connected to the criminal underworld. Henri, also known as the Big Wolf, was suspected to be the hitman on Simo's orders, although the motive behind the attack remains unclear. Just 2 days later, around 6:30 p.m. on February 2nd, 2017, a barber was cutting a customer's hair. Outside, a Seat Ibiza Cupra pulled up and parked by the roadside. Suddenly, a man walked into the barber shop and began pouring a flammable liquid on the barber before setting him on fire with a lighter. The barber was then engulfed in flames, burning alive. The customers in the barber shop frantically tried to extinguish the flames. One customer noticed a bucket of water that had just been used to clean the windows and quickly poured it over the barber, finally putting out the fire. When the ambulance arrived, the barber was immediately taken to the hospital, where doctors concluded that he had sustained second-degree burns covering 12.8% of his body. Surprisingly, this was an entirely innocent man. He had only bought the barbershop from the previous owner a month earlier, and it was the previous owner who was the actual target of the attack. To understand this incident better, we have to go back to the summer of 2016. While Simo was still imprisoned in Germany, his wife told him that she had an unpleasant encounter with the former owner of the barbershop, which she found highly distressing. Upon hearing this, Simo became incredibly angry and wanted to teach that person a lesson. From prison, he instructed some of his accomplices to gather information on this individual, learning that he owned a barbershop. Simo then sent instructions to Henri to severely beat the man, but Henri responded, "It's better to burn him alive. If he dies, so be it." Simo replied, unconcerned about whether the man survived. When Simo later discovered that the injured person was not his intended target, but someone else, he remained determined to seek revenge. Simo ordered his accomplices to track down his target, but the man had fled to Turkey. Simo then decided to focus on the target's relatives, in this case the man's younger brother. From April until May 23rd, Simo ordered a tracking device to be placed on the younger brother's car to monitor his every move. On May 24th, 2017, the time to act had arrived. As the younger brother was driving his Hyundai Getz in Gronau, Germany, a BMW began following him. He noticed that he was being tailed and started to speed up and slow down to test whether he was being followed, and the BMW did the same. He sped up and after a few sharp turns managed to lose the BMW. When he arrived home, he sat in his car to see if he was still being followed. Just as he was about to get out of the car, the BMW reappeared and a person stepped out from the passenger seat and fired 6 shots. The tracking device under the car had allowed the assailant to know the exact location of the target, and the younger brother couldn't escape. The shooter was Moritz, Henri's younger brother, also known as the Little Wolf. However, it seemed another miracle occurred because the target survived once again. At 3:15 a.m. on September 19, 2017, a car stopped in front of the Luxex Shisha Lounge in Enschede. The passenger got out of the car and fired 6 shots at the lounge's front door with an automatic weapon. The lounge was closed at the time and no one was inside. The shooter then returned to the car and fled the scene. Just a few minutes later, he fired 30 bullets into the front of a house, shattering the windows on both the upper and lower floors while the residents were still inside. Fortunately, no one was injured again. This house was located only 350 meters from the Shisha Lounge. Both addresses belonged to a member of the Satudara motorcycle club. But why? To understand the motive behind this attack, we have to look back a little further. Simo had entered into a fierce conflict with the Satudara motorcycle club. There are 2 theories about the cause of this conflict. The first theory is that members of Satudara visited Simo's grow shop and offered to protect him for a fee. Simo didn't want any protection and refused. He then aligned himself with the Tattoo Hitters, a group of hitmen who were enemies of Satudara. This led to a conflict that made Simo want to eliminate the members of Satudara. The second theory is much simpler. The conflict was purely about drug trafficking. Simo and Satudara had been vying for control of the area to sell drugs before Simo transitioned to selling on the dark web. When Satudara continued to sell in the area Simo claimed as his own, he resorted to violence to send a message. Remember Simo's former accomplice, Zakaria, who informed the authorities in Germany, leading to Simo's arrest? Simo hadn't forgotten about him. At around 2:45 a.m. on November 11th, 2017, 2 men threw 2 bricks through the window of a house in Almelo. They then poured gasoline and other flammable liquids through the broken window and set the house on fire. At the time, a woman was sleeping in the front bedroom on the first floor of the house. She woke up and noticed the fire in the living room, allowing her to escape just in time. The fire caused most of the house to burn down, and the woman was none other than Zakaria's mother. It's important to note that while all of this was happening, Simo was still imprisoned in Germany. In 2020, Simo finished serving his sentence in Germany, but he wasn't released. Instead, he was transferred to the Netherlands, where a massive case was being built against him for all the crimes he had committed. With all the charges against him, prosecutors had enough evidence to build a strong case and demand a very long prison sentence for Simo. He was ultimately sentenced to 26 years and 8 months in prison. Many people immediately questioned why the sentence wasn't longer. According to prosecutors, the reason was that all the attacks had failed. Even though Simo had orchestrated much violence, but every attack he ordered was intended to take the victim's life, but unfortunately for him, none succeeded. Had they been successful, he might have been sentenced to life in prison. Journalists found it ironic that he called himself the Godfather, but continually failed. One remarked, "He was only feared because of his unpredictability and his ability to find people crazy enough to do the dirty work he ordered." His title suggests he wasn't really a godfather, he just sat in his small prison cell, giving orders to do this or that. Simo's accomplices, or those who carried out his orders, were tried starting in 2019, receiving sentences ranging from 6 to 18 years. In a completely unexpected twist, during a court hearing in July 2023, Simo and his lawyer were informed that Simo was on a target list. They couldn't reveal who was targeting him or the specific plans, but for now, since he remains in custody, the likelihood of anything happening to him is reduced. What do you think of this story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below so everyone can know. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support me. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.